Great. Wow. Hey, everybody. We're going to remove this clock pretty soon, too. So you guys watch the feed, and the clock goes like this. We're gonna get rid of the clock. So we'll do that in the future. But anyway, yeah, I know Beth wants predictability. She said, why don't you do this at the end of the week, every week? But I told our people, you know, sometimes we want the flexibility. And I just figured, you know, and Mauger's not here, but I think I heard him say, kind of in his own way, that I'm the most transparent quadrant leader since he's been here. And, you know, he has a funny way of communicating, so, but in his own way. So I thought I'd just talk to people. I'm sure you're wondering what's going on up here in Lansing this week, and so I just figured that I'd be available to talk to you about what's going on. Now, I'll just say this. I mean, we know that we're dealing with a lot of very extreme people up here as we're trying to work through a compromise in the middle, something that works for workers in Michigan on the minimum wage, the tip credit, and the earned sick leave policies. So, you know, we're trying to work in the middle and represent workers. And you have some people on the extremes, people that are trying to represent the big labor bosses, people that are looking out for the big corporations. I'm trying to work in the middle in order to represent workers, because what I want is for workers in Michigan to have paid sick time off, but I also want them to have jobs. And we want restaurants to remain open, and we want restaurant workers to make good living and good wages. And they tell us that by keeping the current tip credit system in place, they're making a very good living. Now, you guys know that you had some of these people, these more extreme Democrats that were representing labor bosses, that were looking at policies that were pretty extreme and were going to bankrupt a lot of the restaurants in the state and lower people's pay. And then on the other side, you know, you had a lot of the corporations that wouldn't budge, and they wanted to keep things the way they were. Well, I was happy I could put out a policy that was right down the middle at a compromise between the labor bosses and the corporations that I think will work very well for Michigan workers. And you look at the Senate on, what was that, Thursday? On Thursday, the Senate passed that policy. It was bipartisan. Now, you notice the Republicans carried the day there in the Senate, and I give a lot of credit to Leader Nesbitt and to the Senate Republicans. You know, they don't love the policy in all aspects, but the Senate Republicans carried the water on that and put the politics aside and helped the Democrats do something that's going to matter a lot to restaurant workers across our state. You know, a middle-of-the-road compromise on our tip credit, you know, a middle-of-the-road compromise on our tip credit is going to mean that restaurant workers can keep their jobs and earn a good living and continue to provide for their families, and that their restaurants will still be open. That's what we tried to do with that compromise. You know, it's my expectation that we're going to move that legislation through the House today. And I think it'll be bipartisan there too. You'll see Republicans and Democrats voting for it. Because on Friday, if we don't get something done, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, a lot of their employers are going to close, and it's going to be chaos as everyone tries to adapt to these changes. So we're going to take swift action today in the House to save our restaurant industry. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to continue working on a deal in the middle on earned sick time. And I, you know, I know that a lot of you in the press probably feel that Sam Singh is pretty extreme left, but I'll say this, you know, I think he's been reasonable as we're sitting down with Sam Singh and we're trying to find a middle ground here. I give him a lot of credit that he's taking a lot of his far left ideology and he's setting that aside, because I think that what the reasonable people here in Lansing see is that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs and a lot of small businesses are going to close, and we're facing a Friday emergency deadline that we've got to get a compromise in place. So I give Sam Singh credit that he's stepping up to the plate and negotiating in good faith. Now, I will say, you guys saw, just like I put out a middle-of-the-road compromise on the tip credit, and the Democrats adopted that, and it worked really well. It made it through the Senate. I also put out a middle-of-the-road compromise that looks out for Michigan workers on the earned sick time. And I've read a lot of your press, and the press is saying that that's building a lot of momentum. A lot of people are jumping on that. I even saw the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union talk very positive about me and the work we're doing. And they say that we're going to get this thing done, and it's going to benefit all of Michiganders. So I give the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union a lot of credit for recognizing the work I'm doing and having so much confidence that what I'm proposing we're going to get done, and it's going to benefit all of the Michiganders. So that's really great of them. But I will say that, look, I mean, there are some very far left Democrats in the Michigan Senate, and these people don't want a middle-of-the-road compromise. They want something that's more radical left than that. And so what we're doing is we're reaching across the aisle, and we're working even harder to accommodate some of these more progressive Democrats. And so even though my middle-of-the-road compromise was reaching a lot of people and it was making a lot of progress, and we heard about it in your press that my middle-of-the-road compromise was gaining a lot of momentum, we're up against a Friday deadline here, and so we're going to have to reach a little more across the aisle in order to ensure that we get something done that protects sick leave for Michigan workers before our Friday deadline. And so, we're working through that. I met with Sam Singh today. We've had a number of negotiations over the weekend. And in the legislature, the weekend includes days like Monday. Only politicians have that definition. But we were working through Monday, which was a holiday for government, President's Day. And we were in conversations yesterday. And so I just want to put out a few things here, things as we're working toward this that I think are important. Number one, we want to, all right, so when we're looking at a deal on the earned sick time policy, what's really important is that we protect small businesses as part of this deal. The big corporations like GM, these guys have all kinds of compliance attorneys. They're making record profits. These guys are not going to suffer because of an earned sick leave change. But these smaller businesses, businesses of under 10 people, and any employers, nonprofits, under 10 people. So I would say employers that are small and under 10 people, they don't have professional accounting departments to help them figure out how to make all these adjustments to a very complex changing law. And these are the ones that a one-size-fits-all court-ordered mandate are going to punish the most, and it's their workers who are going to lose their jobs. And many, many Michiganders are employed by small businesses. If you look at it, it's many, many small people. So I just want to say that we're looking at how do you protect small business and how do you protect the workers that work at small business when you're going through this. And so we want sick leave, but I would say too, if you're a very small business, you can't afford as much sick leave as you can if you're a very big business. So we have to think about that. We have to think about how do you make sure you protect them so that these people have jobs, the small businesses are still in effect, and how do you look at things like all the accrual and all the paperwork and that comes in with these new regulations. So I look at things for all employers like how do we front load these plans? So instead of having to track every one of your employees and say, were they here for 6 hours today or 4 hours? And were they here for 8 hours or 7.5 hours yesterday? Let's come up with a system where it front loads it so that you get your hours for the year on the front end. So a worker can take time off if they're sick in January. They don't have to wait till April or May until they accrue enough hours. So it's really important, number one, we protect our small businesses here and their workers, but number two, that we come up with something that's administratively able to happen and that ensures that workers have their paid sick time on the front end and that there aren't all these burdensome accounting processes. You just get your time on the front end and the employer can administer that much easier. I think we need to look at exempting our seasonal workers and looking at temporary workers and figuring out, if you're only there for an assignment of 3 months, why should you get all of this paid time off after your assignment's done? So we're looking at, I think as a deal, you have to do something about these seasonal workers and these temporary workers. But also I would say workers, let's say we front load. Okay? And then you can get a job, you get all that sick time on the front end, you use the paid time off, and then you quit your job and you get another one. And then you do it again and again and again. So also for those workers that are at jobs for a short period of time and then leave to go to another job, you have to address that problem. But you also have to address the seasonal workers, people that are only there for limited periods of time. They shouldn't get the sick time paid the same way that somebody that's there on a full-time assignment, would get it. I would say we have to look at these issues, and one of the main reasons why I think a deal is really important, and you look at Sam Singh's version, and you look at the House version, 4002, which most people think is the model policy. And then you look at our right down the middle compromise that I've already offered. All three of those versions take out this private right of action and rebuttable presumption. And the reason for that, and this is one of the most important reasons why we need to get a deal before Friday, is because you're going to have all kinds of frivolous lawsuits from activists and political actors, and you can just, if you look at these laws, you don't even need to be the worker who's aggrieved. You could just be some activist and file a lawsuit against one of these small businesses because you have a theory that they're abusing these systems. And you're going to have a lot of confusion as this law starts. I mean, look, today is Wednesday, and these small businesses and these employers don't even know if this is going to happen on Friday. And then let's say it happens on Friday, and on Monday, there's somebody who abuses the policy because they don't understand the law, because there's all these crazy implementation things that these out-of-state activists came up with in this in this radical court. And then some activists can file a lawsuit against the employer, and there's a rebuttable presumption, which means that the deck is stacked against the employer. That's a mess. And so that's why, as part of a deal, and I think you already see all sides coming this way on the deal, because you look at Sam Singh's version, it's already the case. Everyone that's looking at a deal is saying we have to do something about this private right of action, and we have to do something about this rebuttable presumption, so you don't have the Wild West with frivolous lawsuits and activists putting these frivolous lawsuits out and bankrupting employers. So what makes more sense is to work this administratively through the LARA department, through LEO. You have all these acronyms. But work this administratively through the LEO department, which is our labor department. And I mentioned that the director there is much more reasonable than the prior director, Jeff Donofrio. Working with Corbin, I think that, we can work this administratively through LEO. But the key is that there's not a rebuttable presumption. It's right down the middle. So you have LEO, and administratively, they go to a complaint, they look at a complaint, and they call balls and strikes right down the middle. Neither side has an advantage. And if someone's abusing the system, then they're fined. And they're fined heavily. And if they're a good actor, they're treated fairly. That's what people want. They don't want crazy lawsuits from activists in the Wild West. I mean, it'll be crazy. So it's really important that we address private right of action and rebuttable presumption, which is somewhere that all parties are currently in agreement. if you look at the Democrat version in the Senate and the Republican versions, most people see the Republican versions as model policy. And then the last thing that I think we need to address in a deal is this no-show, no-call issue, where, the way the activists wrote these bills, you can just not show up for work, not call, and you can keep your job. And we saw some of the more extreme examples of that a lot of you have covered, which is if you're a 911 operator, what do you do if your employees don't call and don't show? What do you do if you're administering a county jail? Or, you look and there's a fire emergency and these people don't show up to work and they don't notify you they're not coming to work. So reasonable people understand that you need a balance here. If you're sick, you should be allowed to take time off to care for yourself and your family. But there has to be some ability for an employer to enforce policies that require you to notify your employer in a reasonable time. And sometimes you're going to have to discipline your employee if your employees are continuing to not show up for work and not notify you. So we need balance there. And I think that's one of the most important parts of a compromise. So I think we can ensure that we do these things. We protect small business. We address no show, no calls. We address the frivolous lawsuits and prevent them. We protect seasonal workers. And we keep small businesses open, and we front load these policies so they're easier to administer. And we look at one more thing too. Bonuses and commissions should not count toward these sick times. I mean, you think about this, the way this is written now, you could get a huge commission or a huge bonus, and that can really affect the policy. So we want to ensure too that the bonuses and commissions are not part of this. This should be about the hours you work at your pay. That's what this should be about. And we want every Michigan worker to have time off when they're sick to care for themselves and their family. We also want them to have a job. We want to keep small businesses open, and we want to keep our restaurant industry afloat, and we want restaurant workers to have a good job and to make a good living. I think through the compromise on the tip credit that I've championed and got through the Senate, and I think we'll get through the House today, that'll be a positive step. And then if we can get a deal, hopefully sometime late tomorrow at the latest, on the sick time, I'd like to protect small business, ensure that we do something about the no-show and the no-call issue, stop the frivolous lawsuits, protect seasonal workers, and make sure that we can front-load the policies. I think we can get a good deal in place that will save our small businesses a lot of headaches and protect a lot of workers in the state. So I think that's the main thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to answer questions about this or anything else. I see I know a lot of you guys watch us on the stream. It's great that so many more reporters are coming to our press conferences. This is great, and particularly Channel 3. I told them you had the best headline last time on the roads. You said, Governor Whitmer introduces a roads plan months after Hall. And I'm waiting for the rest of you to write that headline because it's true. So any questions? It's okay if there are no questions. Yeah, go ahead. You're always a really tough questioner.
You mentioned reaching across the aisle, knowing that this is going to take effect Friday.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you are willing to put your neck out on the line for things when it comes to negotiation, or are you just more willing to let this take effect on Friday as it is now?
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that we come to agreement. I mean, you look at, I think people were surprised that the Democrats haven't acted on our middle-of-the-road 50-50 compromise on the sick credit. I mean, they did act on the tip credit issue that I put out there, middle of the road at 50%. They jumped on that right away. I think a lot of people were surprised the Democrats didn't jump right on the earned sick time leave compromise I put forward, because it wasn't corporations, it wasn't big labor bosses, it was right down the middle, and it worked for Michigan workers. What I've sensed is, since the tip credit vote, a lot of the real extreme union bosses and the out-of-state activists are really ratcheting up the pressure. And so I'm trying to work with these Democrats, because believe it or not, there are a lot of them that are real extreme left, but some of them do see here that if small businesses close after Friday, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Some Democrats understand that we need 911 workers on the job, and we need firefighters, and we need people working in our jails, and you need a policy that can keep them at work and ensure that they show up to work. A lot of Democrats actually understand this, and so we're seeing some Democrats that want to work in the middle on a deal. What I'm trying to do is extend my hand a little farther to them to get a deal. But we have to protect these things. We have to protect small business. We have to protect seasonal workers. We got to make sure that we don't allow frivolous lawsuits. And we have to address this no-call, no-show issue. And I think we should front-load these policies. And we also need to make sure that bonuses and commissions and things that were unintended aren't counted toward the sick time.
So you are putting your ground on those 4 or 5 policies or priorities?
Well, I think we're laying out things that we need to protect in order to do a deal here. And we're going to work with them over the next day or two to try to, meet them even further in the middle. And I think it'll be a good outcome that workers will benefit from.
Mr. Speaker, how did you leave it with the Senate Majority Floor Leader last time you guys talked?
Well, I reminded him that he's pretty extreme. I mean, he's extreme left. And look, I mean, it's hard negotiating with people as radical as Sam Singh on the left. Yeah, we're going to keep meeting. We're going to talk to our caucus about some of these things that I've laid out and try to find a middle-of-the-road compromise. Because ultimately, we can have these conversations, but I have to be able to deliver my caucus, and he has to be able to deliver his caucus. And so we wanted to put down some bright-line things. If they're going to reject our middle-of-the-road 50-50 compromise, then we had to put down some bright line things and then give each caucus an opportunity to talk about them, and hopefully we can get a deal in the next day or so.
Speaker Hall, there's a bill in the House and the Senate regarding paid sick leave. Do you know yet which one you're looking to pursue and compromise on?
Yeah, so if you look at the action of the Senate, they passed a bill on the tip credit that would help our restaurant industry, and it was based on my suggestion, the compromise that I put forward that day. And, I told them they should just do it, but it took them, 6 or 8 hours, and then they did it. And you guys were working very late, which I know reporters don't like to do. But anyway, when they did that, they tie-barred it to the 4002 House bill. And what that means is, in order for the restaurant bill to take effect, which is the Democrat restaurant bill, what do they call that, Senate Bill 8? It has to be, both become law. So Senate Bill 8, which is what we would vote on today in the House, and 4002, which is the Jay DeBoyer House bill. Now, we're going to have to make some changes to the Jay DeBoyer bill, which is in the Senate, because we passed it out of the House. If you remember, and 9 Democrats voted for that. And so what's interesting is the Republican version of both the tip credit and the sick leave are both bipartisan, because the original versions, which most people think is model policy, the Republican House versions, you had Democrats vote for both. So the starting position for the Republicans in the House is bipartisan. The starting position for Democrats in the Senate is very partisan. And I put a middle-of-the-road compromise in there. The Democrats are struggling with that on the sick leave. And so we're going to meet them a little more their way. But what they're going to do is they're going to have to act first in the Senate, because our bill already passed. It's sitting in their chamber. They'll have to send it back to us first if there's a deal, and then we'll act on it hopefully tomorrow night.
Mr. Speaker, you had mentioned putting a voting vote on this meeting today.
Yeah.
How tied, because the bills are tie-barred, I guess, how tied are the negotiations over the sick bills to what that final SBA product looks like? Can that still change, or?
Yeah, well, I think you saw a lot of the radical activist groups on the far left flip out over protecting restaurant workers and ensuring that they get a good living. and that their restaurants stay open. And so you saw some of the activists on the radical left are very mad about a middle-of-the-road compromise. But I'll just say that's what happens when you're compromising. And one of the problems with our politics today are these extremes that represent very small numbers of people, like these union bosses and these out-of-state activists that come in and try to bully legislators. And so I give credit that there are still a few Democrats who seem to be listening to their constituents on these issues. So you're right that there is pressure ramping up, but we saw some Democrats, it wasn't a majority of them, but we saw some Democrats vote for a middle-of-the-road compromise on the tip credit. And so we're going to need that again. We're going to need some Democrats to stand up for their small businesses and for their workers and for their 911 operators and their firefighters and their police, and they're going to have to meet us in the middle on a compromise, because if they don't, chaos is coming on Friday. I mean, it's going to be a total disaster when all these policies take effect with their very confusing rules and their frivolous lawsuits and this one-size-fits-all mandate that won't work for Michigan.
So you don't expect any more changes to SB 8 depending on what happens with the bill?
No, I think we're going to move Senate Bill 8 today, and it'll be on its way to the governor. We'll present it. We're going to present it very fast because there's a Friday deadline. And we have a clerk that knows how to present, Scott Starr. Yeah.
What are some of the remaining sticking points with Senate Dems on paid sick leave, and if you can't come to a deal by tomorrow, we can set Friday?
Yeah, I think we would try to have session Friday, and you know, it's possible it would spill over into Friday morning. I mean, there's some administrative problems with that, because what do you do if the law takes effect at, say, midnight on Friday? But you know, I think Director Corbin, my hope is, would be reasonable in enforcing in that gap. But, you know, the politicians respond very well to a deadline, so my hope is, and can you believe this? I mean, politicians, they wait until the last minute to try to negotiate a deal. Wouldn't it be nice if we would have done this, I don't know, when a few legislators called for it and walked off the House floor in December? Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, everybody would know what was happening, and we probably would already have a roads deal done. Think about what a different place we would be in. But unfortunately, some of the Democrats wanted to wait, and they wouldn't make the tough decisions in December. And here we are up against a February 21 deadline. And that's why I opposed extending it to July, because these politicians, they'll just kick the can down the road. It'll be June 30th, and we'll be right here again with no progress. So we're going to try to get it done before February 21. What was the other part of your question? Sticking points for Senate Dems. You know, I don't want to say too much, but I think, you know, what you're seeing is we've put on the table exempting small business altogether. And so we've got to work through that. I think that's something they struggle with, is how do you exempt small business altogether? So could you get to a place where you're recognizing that small businesses, they can't afford this the way that big businesses can. They don't have big accounting departments like big businesses. It's harder for them to adapt to the changes. You know, is there a way to make this work better for small businesses without a 50 and under exemption? I think that's where we ultimately are going to have to get to. And then, you know, how do you address no call, no shows? You know, some Democrats think you should be able to not show up for work and not notify anybody, and that's fine. So those are a couple of things.
Speaker Hall, we know
Yeah.
that Governor Whitmer was out of the country last week. What role does she play in these negotiations?
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, as the Speaker of the House, you know, I maintain a good relationship with Governor Whitmer, and she's accessible to me when I need to talk to her, and I give her credit for that. I think that we built a very strong relationship, and the reason for that is because she understands that I'm serious, I represent my caucus, and if I make a deal, I'll deliver. You know, you remember like Joe Tate and these guys, they just string you down a road. I saw it when we ended the session. They tell you what you want to hear, and then they string you along for months and months and months. Do you know how frustrating it would be if you're working on something for months and months and months, and then at the last second they say, oh, just kidding, I couldn't deliver? So I think that these other Democrats would rather deal with me as somebody who is straightforward, transparent, and represents our caucus well, and is honest and can deliver to someone of their own party that can't. And so we built a pretty good relationship, and anytime I want to talk to her, she's engaged. I give her credit for that. And I'll just say, you know, somebody intervened here to get these Democrats to come to the table and be more reasonable. I don't know if it was her. I don't know who it was, but I'll just say somebody. I mean, the Democrats go from last year. Now, a lot of people think it's me because what's changed? We have a real leader as Speaker of the House, and now the issues are changing. They want to address sick leave and tip credit. They want to address roads, right? So a lot of people think it's me. But when we were there in December and the Republicans walked off the floor, at that time the Democrats had a position of, we're not doing this. And some of you guys wrote articles about statements that they made, Democrats, in 2018, where they said that these policies were great policies. Now, Democrats are coming to the table with solutions that will work to make this law work better. So something happened. I don't know what it was, but something happened. Yeah.
On a different topic, following the deaths of 2 children physically trained
Mm-hmm.
within this month, do you think the state has any responsibility to evaluate the way that homeless services are provided in Michigan, given that sort of localized national?
Yeah, it was just tragic to read about that. And I know, is that DHHS that administers these policies, or is it a different department? Is it DHHS? Does anyone know? Well, if it is DHHS, you know, I know that they're a very large department and they need a lot of oversight and they need a lot of help with their appropriations. And you look at, we've created 3 appropriations subcommittees to really dig into DHHS, and we have 3 oversight committees looking into DHHS. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done at DHHS. And, you know, when it's a very big department, there's things that slip through the cracks. And so we're going to provide it better oversight. And hopefully government learns from this, because it's just a tragedy to read about. It's terrible. So any other questions? Yeah.
Do you think that the governor will sign these paid sick leave and
I hope she will. You know, what I'm trying to do is find a landing spot right in the middle, and I hope the governor would sign it. And if she does, we're going to need her to sign it quickly, because this thing takes effect on Friday. Yeah. You wrote a great article, Dave Eggert and Cranes. You guys should all read Cranes if you don't. I mean, you've been covering this issue better than anybody, so great job.
You mentioned the small business exemption. Are you willing to depend on 10 employees? That's what you thought last week.
Yeah, so I think that you need, okay. First of all, why is 10 a magic number? You know, it's like, what happens if you have 11 employees, right? Or if you want to have 11 employees, but you don't have 11 employees because the law says 10 and under, right? But I'll just say this, you know, I think there's agreement on the idea, and there should be agreement on the idea, that 10 and under are those that are most affected by this. I mean, if you're under 10 employees, whether you're a nonprofit or a small business or whatever, you're going to have the hardest time affording and having the resources to administer this policy. And so those are the workers, the ones that work at the small businesses 10 and under, that are at the most risk of losing their jobs over this mandate. So I think there's agreement there that this is the biggest group affected. And so then the question is, what do you do about it? And I think those are the conversations that are going on, is what do you do about that fact? And we're going to try to find a solution that protects small business, that ensures that the hours are front-loaded, and that it's a system that's manageable, and that small business can can implement it without dealing with crazy lawsuits and all kinds of fines and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Follow up, do you feel like these two bills should be tied together? If you can't get a deal on this, I think we'll have to break the tie bar so the
No, I think they should be tie-barred because they're both urgent problems and they both have a February 21 deadline. And if we don't address them now, then the politicians will find some excuse to kick this down the curb, and it'll be going on for months and months and months.
Two more questions?
Yeah, Beth?
Has the governor given you like any guidelines as like I will sign this, I will sign that, or should we do whatever gets passed?
I think this is a very complex policy. I mean, particularly the sick leave is a very complex policy, and so I think she'll look at what we come up with. So I've done my part, like I'm doing with you, to try to make sure everyone understands what are some of these core things. And I'm hopeful that the others will come our way and adopt these core things. And we're moving their way, because it is urgent that we have a deal. You look at the consequences. I mean, on Friday, it's going to be chaos, and these small businesses are going to be struggling. You're going to have crazy lawsuits. Workers are going to have job losses. They're going to lose their jobs. It's a mess. So, I think we'll just have to see what she does based on what we come up with. I don't know. This is our guy right here. This is going to be a tough one because sometimes Scubit gives him questions.
Preference, the Friday deadline comes, let it go and let the chaos rage and renegotiate after that, or push it down the road and keep going?
No, he's right, because you're right. I mean, if we don't get a deal by Friday, people will blame the Democrats, because the Democrats are the ones that are struggling to get there. And he's right that there'll be outrage at Democrats, and it'll cost Democrats politically. And that's why you see some of the Democrats that are changing their positions, and they're so desperate to get a deal because they understand that if we don't get something done on this, Democrats will be blamed, and Democrats will lose their jobs. I'll just say this, though. I have to look in the eye every small business owner and worker in my district, and they're expecting me to do my best in good faith to solve this problem, and that's what I'm trying to do. It'd be easier to just blame them. Like you do 100% of what I want, or else I'm going to blame you. Like that's maybe more traditional what politicians do, but that's not what the people of Kalamazoo and Allegan County elected me to do. And so I think you're seeing, as the Republicans in the House turn into the governing party, we're approaching government with that mindset. We have to deliver for the people of Michigan. They don't want us to blame the other side. They want us to solve their problems, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to work really hard to do it by the Friday deadline. What did you have, Kyle?
Well, I was just going to ask, you saw that letter from Sam Baggenstoss on that this is adopt and amend. What you guys are doing right now is basically adopt and amend part 2.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this guy is a Democrat partisan hack. He worked for the Biden administration. He worked for Eric Holder, I understand, and he even interned for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So he's a very partisan Democrat labor hack, and he has very fringe legal theories. Most people in the mainstream don't share his radical views. So look, I mean, he's a partisan labor hack, and we're not going to listen to his fringe views. We're going to try to get a solution. And I give credit to the Democrats that are standing up to radical leftists like this crazy labor attorney. I should call him a labor activist, left-wing labor activist. Give credit to those Democrats that are standing up to these radical guys, because we've got to work for the people of Michigan, not radical left Biden administration activists. All right, any other questions? We're good? All right. Yeah, good.
Has there been any consideration of putting like an appropriation in
You think we should do that? What do you think? You think we should? Well, now that you brought it up, maybe we'll think about it. See, Beth has always given me ideas. You remember when Beth set public policy with her opinion on the, or her question on the earmarks, and she said, Matt, they're not just all enhancement grants, they're healthcare grants, they're transportation grants, and I looked into it, and Beth was right, and we changed public policy because of Beth, so thank you for that idea. You know, maybe it's a good idea. Any other, well, I mean, you're giving me ideas. I got to go back to the lab now and think about them. Any other? Yeah, Simon, and then Greg says I got to go after this.
The rest of the 9 bills that were held back.
Yeah.
that were not presented together. Where's that at?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at this. This is a very political lawsuit, and you look at the briefs, and you can see this will probably get dismissed very quickly. And you see, we have a very respected attorney in Steve Liedl representing me, and he understands. And you look at the other side, and they have this hack working for them, Mark Brewer, and he was the judge's attorney at one time. But anyway, this hack, Mark Brewer, you look at his arguments on the briefs, they're very weak, and so most people think it'll get dismissed very quickly. There is some oral arguments scheduled for this for, I think, next week on Monday. So we'll see how those go, but I have a lot of confidence in Steve Liedl as he goes through those oral arguments. It's a real mismatch, him and Mark Brewer, but we'll see what happens. But it is a political lawsuit, and you know, it's not good. So, all right, thanks everybody. Maybe we'll do this again tomorrow. You never know. All right.